Welcome to Monday. We got 6 games on tonight. I want to address something first off. You know, I didn't do a video this week where I talked about the power rankings. I'm just going to throw this out there. I update the board every day. Currently, the Toronto Maple Leafs sit at 17th. They've moved up 2 spots since Saturday without playing a game because teams ahead of them have lost and they've moved up. I work every day on making sure that that board is as accurate as possible. And I go over the results a few different times, and I don't have a point system, but I go over it and over it and over it. So if fans of certain teams ranked number 17 currently aren't happy with being ranked 17, I don't have any kind of influence on that. I don't do anything to cause teams to fall down lower than they are. One needs look no further than the fact that the Vancouver Canucks currently are 28th. And Boston, despite the fact they haven't lost in regulation in their last 16, stand second, not first. Even though the team that they're behind have lost games in regulation in their last 10. That's the only addressing I'm going to do with that. And that's it. It's been a slow but steady decline for Toronto, and it's been a slow but steady decline for a number of teams. And can they climb back up? Absolutely. Power rankings measure how a team's playing right now. And I don't want to hear, well, they're getting points in their games. No, when your team loses a lead with a minute left in the third period and then loses quickly in overtime, that is not a good result. When you're consistently losing to teams that are beneath you in the standings, that is not a good result either. And I can't turn the power rankings around and go, well, they beat Ottawa at home, or they beat Ottawa on the road. They had to come back from 3-1 down in the third to do it, but they won. I can't do that. I can't qualify that and say, well, they should jump up 3-4 spots for that. So that's the end of me addressing that one. Now let's move on to tonight's games. The Toronto Maple Leafs are at home against Colorado. So if the 26-16-3 Colorado Avalanche, who are 15-8-1 against the East, 9-1 in their last 10 to stand 12th in the league, if the Leafs want to show that they're going to stop this descent, tonight has to be the night. They're 26-17-5. They're 13-7-2 against the West. They're 3-3-4 in their last 10. 2 of those are shootout wins. And they're 10th overall. So they're right in the middle. There are a lot of teams that are within a few points of that 10th spot. This is when, if they're going to turn it around, they have to. But again, I think part of it with Toronto is there's no pressure for under them. There's none. They're so many points clear of 4th place in the Atlantic. They're basically assured of 3rd place overall in their division. And motivation may be part of it. That could be part of it. I personally think defense plays a huge role in it, but that's me personally. And also just the youth in general. And now they've got Colorado coming in with Nathan MacKinnon. And this road trip could be amazing for Colorado. I know they're making the Western Canadian swing, and Western Canada is usually very accommodating to visiting teams. This is a chance for Leaf fans to see that just how well MacKinnon is playing if they haven't been watching him. And this is really a chance for Colorado to verify their status as now a contender. So they've got themselves into a playoff spot. They've got themselves into the conversation for maybe they can start being top 3. If they can win 10 in a row, if they can win one in Toronto tonight, they may very well be in the contending spot. And it's this kind of hard to define spot in the standings where you go from playoff team to legit contender. But Colorado's on the verge of that. I really think that's the next step for them. Detroit is in New Jersey. The Detroit Red Wings 18-20-7 overall. 9-13-6 against the East. So they have trouble with the East. 5-5, and they're 27th overall. The New Jersey Devils 24-13-8 overall. 13-7-5 against the East. 3-4-3 in their last 10. They have been struggling. And they're 11th place overall. So they're sandwiched right between Toronto and Colorado. The New Jersey Devils are kind of on the verge of something here. The Devils can start to turn things around a little bit if they can win this one tonight. Now, they've won 2 out of 3. It's not as dire for New Jersey now as it was. And they're in a good spot in the standings. But a win at home against Detroit is a necessity. For them, this game tonight could turn things around one way or the other. Because if Detroit wins this, there's teams beneath them that could absolutely get in there. And they're not that far ahead of Columbus for that second spot. And it would be nice to see them kind of cushion that lead. I want to see New Jersey do well. I don't want to see them fall out of the playoffs. I think it's a more interesting story with all the rookies that they have. But again, much like with Toronto, when you've got that much youth, they are prone to going through two things. Either a slump mid-season or they hit the wall. Around game 50, there's a lot of rookies that hit the wall because they haven't played this kind of a grinding schedule before. They haven't played this many games before. And at about game 50, they start to really feel it. The aches and pains add up, and they start to have trouble getting up for every game. And that's just part of the learning curve as a rookie. But for Detroit, on the other hand, well, they'd have to win a lot of games in a row for me to really seriously talk about them being any kind of contender right now. Detroit is going to be in full sell mode come trade deadline, and it'll be interesting to see what they can get for the players that are available. Next up, Tampa Bay's and Chicago. So Tampa Bay's lost 5 out of 7, and they're in danger of losing their spot. Boston is only 3 points behind them, and Tampa hasn't looked very good lately. They're 4-5-1 in their last 10. They're 31-12-3 overall, so they've got a nice cushion for themselves with their spot in the playoffs. They're 13-5-0 against the West. They're still second overall, behind Vegas. Yeah. Chicago's 22-18-6 overall, 12-7-2 against the East. They're 5-4-1 in their last 10, so they're better in their last 10 than Tampa, and they're 22nd overall. Jeff Glass has been confirmed as the starter for tonight because, of course, he is. He's the better of the two goalies right now. Though goaltending has been an issue for Chicago with Corey Crawford out. There's no way around that. As I've said before, maybe Corey Crawford was just masking some of the other issues with Chicago by playing fantastic hockey and being an all-star. For Tampa, they can still turn this around easily. We could be looking back a month now and say, remember when they lost 5 out of 7? Yeah, me neither. But they need to win this game. We're getting closer to the All-Star break, and you don't want to be cold going into the All-Star break. You want to come out with with momentum before that. And I don't know. I think Chicago probably wins this game. Because they're at home, I have a hard time going against Chicago. And because Chicago got killed by the Islanders, I would favor Chicago in this game. But because I'm a nice guy and I'm Canadian, I'll say in overtime. That way they both get points. But between the two, Chicago mildly gets the nod. Mildly, just a little bit. All right, next up, Ottawa. The hapless Ottawa Senators, 15-20-9 overall, 4-5-1 in their last 10. 6-8-3 against the West, so they're better against the West than they are against the East, but they're 29th overall. They're in Minnesota against a team that's 25-17-5, 12-6-3 against the East, 6-2-2 in their last 10, and they're 15th overall. Minnesota's on their way up. Ottawa continues to disappoint. And it's funny because Matt Duchene's totals have got better over the last 10 games. Ottawa's showing signs of turning a corner, but they're so far back of that corner. They're so far back of the playoffs now that even though they're playing better, it's not as noticeable as it would have been, say, in November if they were playing like this. A long season continues to get longer for Ottawa. And now they get to go into Minnesota and play against a team that's been playing very, very well for the last few weeks. Minnesota's gradually moving its way up in the standings. They're getting better, and they're healthy, and If Zach Parise can ever rediscover his scoring touch from his better days, then Minnesota is Stanley Cup contender. But again, it's the Central, and the Central is a brutal division. Remember, last place in the Central is Chicago, and Chicago is not considered to be they're not considered to be a bad team by most people. They're just at the bottom because it's the Central, and the Central is one rough, tough division. But for Minnesota tonight, they get a chance to make more ground. Maybe Chicago loses at home to Tampa. They win again, and maybe Chicago starts getting into that conversation of maybe they'll be sellers at the deadline. And I don't see that. And yet, if they fall much further out, if they end up in a situation where there's a lot of teams to jump over between them and the playoffs, selling is a possibility. It's a very real possibility for the Chicago Blackhawks, and that'd be a first in about the last decade. I can't think of the last time that Chicago was a seller at the deadline. All right, we've discussed other hapless teams, but let's get into Arizona and New York. So the Islanders are 24-20-4. They're 11-7-3 against the West. They're 4-6 in their last 10. The Islanders have not been playing particularly well. They're 21st overall, so they're genuinely not in the playoffs. The Arizona Coyotes, well, we all know they're last overall. They're 7-14-2 against the East, which is actually better than the record against the West. They're 11-28-9 overall, and they're 3-3-4 in their last 10. So Arizona has the same record in their last 10 as Toronto. And yet we're not talking much about Arizona right now. The Coyotes are playing better, and it comes down again to talent. The work ethic is there. The effort is there. The talent isn't. That ability to win those close games is not there. And they remind me a lot of the Toronto Maple Leafs the year that they drafted Austin Matthews. The year before Austin Matthews arrived in Toronto, they lost a lot of one-goal games. A lot of close games, and it was just they didn't have the talent to get over the hump. But the work effort that was there that season carried over into the next season, and then they were winning those games that they'd been losing the year before. Arizona is not as lost as it might look, but in come the Islanders. The Islanders off a 7-3 win over Chicago, and this is a game the Islanders need to, and I believe they will win. We're still looking at a situation where John Tavares may be on his way out of New York, but it won't be this season. It'll be in the offseason. The Islanders need to go on a bit of a run here. I mean, if you think about it from Tavares' point of view, yes. The Islanders, having a home at Belmont and having, a permanent home would be a huge relief, and it'll allow them to bring in new players and to sign guys long term. But for Tavares, if he looks at this team and continues to see it moving away from instead of closer to a contender spot in the NHL, it'll be harder for them to sell him on the idea of spending the rest of his career there. So the Islanders definitely need to turn it around. Not because, and I'm not trying to paint Tavares as selfish or anything, it's just Tavares has played for the New York Islanders for a long time. And if he perceives the team is getting further away from contending for a cup rather than closer to it, he may say, I can't do this. And he may look for a team like a Carolina or a Montreal or somebody who needs a number one center. Now, Montreal is not a fit in terms of getting closer to the Stanley Cup. I'm just pointing out teams that need a center. That's all I'm doing. And Carolina might be a good fit, but again, that's in the division, and he may be sensible about moving in the division. But the Islanders need to put some wins together soon, or else this conversation is going to get louder. And nobody wants that. All right. And finally, last but not least, the thing de resistance. Buffalo. Wow. 4-10-3 in their last, or 4-10-3 against the West. 11-26-9 overall. 2-6-2 in their last 10. They're 30th overall. They're barely ahead of Arizona at this point. And they're in Calgary. The Flames are 25-16-5. 10-6-2 against the East. 7-1-2 in their last 10, and they're 13th overall. That 7-1 beating that Dallas put on Buffalo, to me it looked like Buffalo was an American Hockey League team. Buffalo has to find some pride. They have to dig down, find some pride, and show up and win some games here. Because this is pretty bad stuff here. And in fact, they have the same amount of points as Arizona. The only divider is they've played 2 less games. So that's the only reason they're ahead of Arizona. Remember, finishing last does not guarantee you the #1 draft pick. Doesn't guarantee you Dahlin at all. You could draft 4th. Ask Colorado about that. And they need to win some games. They have to. This is just embarrassing. And yet, they're in Calgary against one of the hottest teams in the league. The Flames, winners of 7 of 8. That last game was a shootout loss to Winnipeg. I treat those as ties. And the Flames are playing really solid hockey in all areas. Goaltending, defense, forwards, everything, scoring. It's all working for the Flames right now, and everything's working against Buffalo right now. If I was going to say, here's my upset of the night, I might pick Buffalo and Calgary, but my brain works, so I can't do that. Upset, if I was going to pick an upset tonight, I would say maybe Ottawa over Minnesota, just because Ottawa might be due, and they do have a better record against the West than they have against the East. But that's just a reach on my part. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happen upon this video. And hey, thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.